All right. So, Peter, I say this with great trepidation because I think a lot of people are trying to tune out politics right now because it's very stressful. But hang with us because from a strategic perspective, this is really fun. I texted you and our producer, Sarah, and our executive producer, Neely, after Joe Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris seems to be his replacement on the ticket. And I said, this is really interesting because it dovetails with a lot of what we've studied about underdogs in sports. If you've listened to our show for any length of time, if you read our articles for any length of time, even college basketball alone, the biggest factor an underdog wants to bring to any situation is to introduce chaos. And very clearly, the Democrats under Joe Biden were a decided underdog in this election. Well, now they've done something that is largely unprecedented in the modern era. And what that's doing is completely reshuffling the deck, introducing chaos. And what's funny, it's a flipped version of what Donald Trump did as an underdog in 2016. So I just think it's fascinating to look at it from that perspective.
Because it's a flipped version of what Donald Trump did in 2016, I don't have trepidation talking about this because all we get from the media, political media. Listen, I was a political journalist for a long time. And political media is focused on horse races and personalities, but they don't cover the horse race. You could follow the horse race all the time, but they don't cover the horse race with any analytical smarts at all. Donald Trump's personality and behavior overwhelmed coverage so much, and the surprise of him being competitive, that nobody ever bothered talking about the fact that his 2016 campaign was a brilliant underdog campaign. I'm not here to talk about whether that's accidental or on purpose, but there's never been something so chaotic as the Trump 26 campaign. There never
he
been
threw Peter. He threw out every established rule, and said, "We're doing it this way." So again, whatever you think of it, it was different, and no one. It was like a team inventing an entirely new zone defense that no one had ever seen before, and no one was sure how to play against it.
It was a lot of high risk that turned out to pay off.
Exactly.
I mean,
and
it almost goes back to everything we talk about in Giant Killers. It was pressing the opponent, right, to gain the initiative. It was forcing turnovers by the opponent, right? And it was a lot of, bombs away attempts. And he happened to hit a lot of them and again, some of it may have been coincidental. I don't think anyone expected him to pull off the Electoral College triumph that he did, but it worked, and it never would have worked had it been more conventional. And so now here we have that, which has gone unremarked because we're not supposed to study anything about Trump to see what was smart or what we might learn from it. And the Democrats are all about behaving according to accepted norms and pleasing journalists and pleasing the chattering classes. And we're about to go down the tubes holding in their hands evidence that the evidence was basically no longer winnable with the strategies they were pursuing. They were about to keep pursuing those strategies right up until last Sunday.
That's right. That's right. The Democrats, say what you will, but you nailed it. There's been this refusal to recognize that the norms have changed, that the games have changed, that you talk about your opponents differently, that truth may not even matter anymore, that there's a whole bunch of this world we're living in is a chaotic, different world with new mores and stuff. So
Jordan, they turned themselves into a vulnerable giant, the kind of team that had a big, safe guy in the middle and wouldn't take 3-point shots in a new world of basketball. That's what they became.
It was Purdue with Zach.
It was watching Purdue all over again. We can't not bring them up, but yeah, exactly.
And here's another analogy I'd like to make. Sometimes the best move or the way to look at making a move is, what would your opponent least like to see? So, like, am I going to bring in this pitcher? Well, who would they not want to face? Am I going to bench my starting quarterback? What would the other team wish I did, and so forth, right? If you put yourself in their shoes, sometimes it helps lead you to the right decision. Well, you're seeing right now, a lot of Republicans are saying Joe Biden should have to stay on the ballot, or they're scrambling for new messaging. That alone, from a strategic perspective, should tell the Democrats they probably did something. They may have done it ass backwards.
Let's shift to a different, use a different sport for analogy. That's a tell in poker, right? And I'd also, there are other sports analogies we can draw here applicable to underdogs. One is sometimes you want to do the better matchup, even though you weren't sure it was right overall in a
Uh-huh.
given circumstance. You want to, and the Democrats may have decided that Kamala Harris versus Trump and a popular Midwestern or Rust Belt governor versus J.D. Vance turns out to be a better matchup in debates and the campaign and overall than Biden versus Trump and Harris versus Vance. I'll tell you something else. Usually we say, oh, well, when you fire a coach or a manager because a team's doing badly and they get a bump, that's just regression to the mean. But what if you need is regression to the mean? What if you needed everybody who doesn't want to vote for Donald Trump to say, I'm going to vote Democratic? A week ago, that wasn't happening. You replaced the top of the ticket, and all of a sudden, what if everybody who's kind of nominally or curiously or partially a Democrat is now going to vote Democratic? That's just another version of regression to the mean, but the mean can regress up. That's what this bounce, if it's a bounce, that's what this bounce is going to be.
And this isn't to say Harris is going to win. This isn't to say this will ultimately work, but I'll leave it with this, Peter. Trump is at his best when he's an underdog, okay? And
Yep.
what the race was shaping up as was a referendum on Biden, even though people will point out Trump has all these felony convictions and January 6th and a record of 4 years. Somehow Biden's debate performance and his age had shifted the dynamic to it was a referendum on him. Well, now this may change, but it really, by bringing in Harris, it really pushes the onus back onto Trump as a giant. And it
Right.
may expose some vulnerabilities he has as a giant. So from a piece of political strategy, I think this was a brilliant move. That doesn't mean it will work. It's still an uphill battle for the Democrats, but as a fan of underdog strategies across all platforms in life, I admire the high risk, high reward nature of it. We hope you appreciate the analogy here and enjoy the strategy end of it and don't get too caught up in the partisanship of it. And if not, we'll be back with more
Hey,
Olympics next
get
week.
caught up in the partisanship of it. Let us know. Either way, it's okay. I mean, and then go back to the Olympics. It's okay.
Yeah. Olympics, trade deadline, all that stuff coming up next week. Until then, I'm Jordan. That's Peter. Have a great start of the Olympics.